Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry. Welcome to the show today. I'm excited because I have on the phone with me Janna Hoiberg, who has been speaking professionally for 6 years. The content Janna speaks on is family business and transition in family business, and also backpacking, how backpacking correlates to business. Very interesting. Janna speaks in the U.S. and internationally. She's based out of one of the greatest cities in the world. That's because I live in it too, called Colorado Springs, Colorado. Janna has written 2 books. The first one is called Family Business, How to Be in Business with People You Love Without Hating Them. The second one is The Backpacker's Guide to Business Success, Thriving in the Wilderness of Business. Janna, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here, and Colorado Springs is a wonderful city to live in.
It is, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the best. But hey, anybody will argue with you, won't they?
That's exactly right, and they can be wrong, too.
That's right. Well, Janna, tell us about your speaking business. What are you telling people? How are you helping them? What are you teaching them?
Well, as I work with family businesses, and part of the reason I got into this is there is a huge transition going on right now as family businesses and all of us baby boomers start transitioning to the next generation. And part of the challenge of that is the current millennials, the current generation, does things just a little bit different than we did, just like when we were with our parents. You know, we did things different, and that sometimes created some conflict. And part of what I do is to help walk alongside business owners and in a speaking environment is have them look and understand how they need to look at this next generation and to pave the way so that they can be successful. Because unfortunately, only about 3% of businesses ever make it to the 4th generation. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it is the transition is so difficult. So I work with them and I teach them in group audiences. I go into companies and work with the families and talk to them about what does it mean to have boundaries? What does it mean and how are we going to look at that transition? Of the people that are in the current generation, who are going to be the best people to pick it up for the next generation? Because not always are the right people in the right spots within that business. And we see that in all businesses, that it becomes far more emotionally impacted in the family business because junior, whether that's male or female, may not be the same visionary that the current generation has. So how are you going to move that business forward and ensure that it is successful? Is that making sense there?
Absolutely. I actually know very well where you're coming from. My dad he passed away about 10 months ago, had a True Value hardware store.
Yes.
In Lumberyard, and that's a family business. And I have 3 siblings, and I was the only one even remotely interested at the time. And one time we brought in a sibling and her husband, and that did not turn out well. And I'm sure you can relate to that kind of thing.
That's exactly what happens is a lot of times the siblings may have a passion for the business, but they don't always understand business. They understand parts of it. And, you know, in my book, I talk about just sometimes the challenge is making sure that the current generation is running the business as a business. It is a family business, and the family is in there, but you have to understand first it's a business. And what's right for the business isn't always right for the family. And what's right for the family isn't always right for the business. And it's just figuring out what's the best path to take there. One of the other aspects is most family businesses also have those other things called employees. And how those employees interact with the family members and the path they take and the boundaries they have can impact how that business moves forward to the next generation as well. And what profitability is like, whether customers even stay when the next generation takes over. And the smoother that can be, the better off the business is, the family, and the end result from there. One of the other things that I see in a lot of family businesses is you've got, let's just say, for example, mom and dad. It can be uncles, aunts, but we'll just say mom and dad. They've now decided that they're going to pass this business off to the next generation. Well, their retirement, in most cases, in many cases, is built up the success of those kids and that next generation being able to pay for the business as it gets passed on, because that's what's going to allow them to live. And that's a lot of times where the conflict comes in as well.
That's tough, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is tough. It becomes a time of uncertainty, and especially when you get other economic uncertainties, the next generation wants to and should try new things. But the current generation is just wrestling with, okay, this is new and it's not how I was doing it. And is it going to be successful? And if it's not, it doesn't just impact mom and dad, but it's impacting the kids, and sometimes kids that are outside of the business, because they still have rights to that inheritance. So it becomes a very muddy water that can be walked through, but often they've never done it before. So you need somebody else to really help them. And that's a lot of what I speak on in group settings and just within executive teams and things along that line.
So the listeners may be thinking, what expertise do you have behind that? I take it you went through that quite a bit in your life already.
Well, there's been a couple of things. One, I've worked with family businesses for over 30 years, and working in them in some cases. My parents came from a family business that I did not take over, and I did not, and that happens a lot. But I had clients that were in there, and then I had been a executive coach for a number of years as well. And I was, as an executive coach, walking alongside and seeing the turmoil that was going on in these businesses. And in seeing that, that's what led to me wanting to leverage my time, both from a speaking and a book perspective, of seeing the same challenges over and over and over again. And the other aspect of it is every family business feels like they're going through this alone, that no one has ever had to walk this path before. And as a result, that loneliness means that they don't ask for the help that they need, and there is help out there. And it doesn't have to be as difficult as they think it is.
What do you find is one of the most common problems in family businesses?
It probably comes down to three. One is lack of boundaries. They have intermingled business and personal so much together, and their personal lives and business lives, and that you don't have a separation. So as you try to separate out, it's very much, it's sort of like taking a plant and ripping the roots apart. So that becomes one of them. Lack of roles and responsibilities. You see it a lot more in family businesses where the family sort of does what needs to be done. And because you don't understand that this person is supposed to do this role and this person is supposed to do this role and the third person is supposed to do this role, you get either crossover or things fall through the crack a lot more than you do when you have structure. And so that lack of structure tends to cause problems from there. And then communication, because Mom remembers when Junior did this when he was 7 years old. And the older sister remembers when her sister did that when she was 9, and they're still holding it against him.
I can see that happens, but that's incredible also at the same time.
Yeah, and there's stories. I have more stories than we have time in this interview to talk about. Some of them even publicly traded. There was a business in New England that went, publicly traded, actually fairly large. Actually, I take that back. It wasn't a publicly traded. It was privately held. But essentially, two cousins fought over the business, and the root of the problem that caused them to be fighting over the business is a fight that they had when they were children.
No kidding.
And they just have never gotten along since then. It's a fascinating story, and I won't get into all the details from there, but it just fascinating to see. And we can all look at our own families and our own environments. And a lot of people would say, I would never work with, my brother, my sister, my parents, whatever. Some people love it, and you just have to know and understand. One of the fun interviews I did with the book was I interviewed two sisters and a brother, and we spent a couple of hours talking. And at the very end of the interview, I asked them, I said, okay, if you were to give one piece of advice to a family that is looking at going into business, or siblings, buying it off their parents, what would be that one piece of advice? And unscripted, they just all looked at each other and loudly said, "Don't!" And it was, and it was just so funny at that, just in unison, in chorus. And I looked at them, I said, "You just told me, you told me some trials, but you've also told me how much you love working together." And they said, "Yes, but we wouldn't wish it on anybody else." So there's a balance there, and it's just understanding what you're going to be in for. And then there are thousands and so many different ways that family businesses are wonderful. And I don't want to focus on the negative, but it's the negative that often tends to come out, because that's where the frustration comes from and things like that.
Wow, interesting. I know that when my dad asked one of my siblings to come, there was kind of an understanding of what one of the people's jobs would be, but that's really about all the communication there was. There wasn't anything like, okay, here's how this needs to work. I want to make sure you're on board. And if it doesn't work, we all agree to, fix it, or you guys can't work here, or something like that, is kind of how I see that should have went. What do you think?
Right. Well, and that's exactly what happens, is they just come into the business. But how many, if you go to apply for a job, how many people would go apply for a job and allow the person you're going to be working for to say, well, we're sort of going to have this job, and it might be this or it might be that. Well, you just come on, it'll be all fine, and we're just going to, you're going to do the things that you want, because you're looking for. Am I going to do sales? Am I going to do accounting? Am I going to have to, work on the floor? Am I taking the trash out? And in the family business, that's usually all of the above.
Yeah.
And I don't care what size it is. But the challenge is really going and saying, okay, we're going to have you, we want to bring you on, and we need to build the revenue, and you need to understand this company. So we're going to put you in a sales role, and we want you to be working with customers and clients and growing the business. But if the person who's going to go do that doesn't like talking to people and doesn't like to get out of their comfort zone, they're probably not well qualified for the sales job. But I see a lot of people doing that hate it, but are only doing it because that was what Dad told them to do.
Now, when that's an interesting point you bring up. If you assign somebody to a sales job, but they're an introvert, how do you decide what's going to work for them at first?
Well, in the same way you would if that individual was going to go work for another company. What do they like doing? Okay, are they the analytical type? So there's a lot of tools and the like that can help people understand what they want to do. Again, are you analytical? Do you make decisions quickly? Do you like working with people? Do you want to be in an office all day? If you're a salesperson and I'm extroverted and you like being with people, the same can happen if they go and say, okay, you're going to go and you're going to be in the accounting office all day long, and you're going to be paying attention to numbers and details, and they don't like numbers and details. It's really the same process of just going and understanding what are their skill sets, what are they good at, and letting them thrive in that area.
Are you familiar with the Young Typology test?
I am not.
It's a test where you can, it's like a 80-question test, and it's basically a yes or no thing. And it's a great way to figure out how introverted you are or not, or extroverted. I just wondered if you included that part of your...
I tend to use DISC, which is a very simple behavioral assessment of just understanding what people like. And it only takes about 20 minutes. There's probably some similarities that go along with that, because there's a lot of different types of tests out there. And from that DISC, you can go and understand more about how people behave, how they interact, what they want to do. In a sales situation, you probably don't want to have somebody who never, wants to close a sale. Now, it doesn't mean that people can't learn how to do it, but they've got to have a desire to do some of that. And so often you're trying to put people square pegs into round holes, and that happens more in the family business than it probably does other businesses.
I have no doubt. Now, quickly, we've got just a minute or two. I'm interested in your Backpacker's Guide to Business Success. You are a backpacker?
I am a backpacker, and I got the idea for the book from spending lots of time hiking, lots of time on mountains, and I'll just give you an example from the book. At Colorado Springs, we're about 6,500 feet, or at least that's where my house is, and we have about 80% of the oxygen that you would have at sea level, okay?
Right. But
we still manage to succeed and thrive in the life. You go to the top of the mountain, and around 14,000 feet, you have about 61% of the oxygen. But we still breathe, we still make it, we still succeed. But isn't that true in business? There's times you do not have all the resources that you need to go and accomplish the goal, but you make it happen anyway. So a lot of this goes to attitude and how you want to look at it and how you want to achieve your goal. And you don't take somebody from sea level, fly them into the airport, and have them climb a mountain the next day. They're probably going to have some altitude sickness. Yep. The same goes with, training your team and things along that line. So I just looked at every aspect of what I learned in backpacking and just saw the direct correlations to business and said, this is just going to be a fun way of people being able to relate to business, backpacking, outdoors, and just, sometimes we have to look at things in a different way to apply it to our day-to-day business environment.
Yeah, terrific analogy. Now, have your backpack climbed up on Pikes Peak?
I've done Pikes Peak. I've done 13 14ers as of this year. I've done Blanca and Mount Democrat and Bross and a full list of them. And then we do also a fair amount of just backpacking. So we did 36 miles in 3 days this summer.
Wow.
And we had some flat time in there, so it allowed us to make some good mileage, which we don't typically do when we're going from 11 to 13 down to 12, up to 13 down to 11. But it was just a fun time of backpacking.
Well, for the listeners, when she means 14ers, that means 14,000-foot mountains. And if you've ever tried to go up one of those, you would understand the feat that is. So that is fantastic, Janna. Tell us how we can get a hold of you to hear you speak or to get more information.
Probably the best way is to check me out on my website, which is jannahoiberg.com. So it's Janna, and the last name is Hoib, as in boy, ERG. So jannahoiberg.com, and you can find out the various topics I speak on, some testimonials. I've got a lot of white papers and things like that. And if you'd like to give me a call, you can reach me at 719-358-6936.
Okay, Janna. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. That was great information. That was right up my alley, and I know the listeners appreciated it.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.